This book just literally took my heart out of my chest, squeezed it, crumbled it into a million pieces, let the ashes fall to the floor, and then just blew my ashes into the wind. And now I don't have a heart anymore. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here today. Recently, I was talking to one of my very best friends. Her name is Mia. We have been best friends since middle school. I was talking to her recently about different books because she just read a few of my favorite books, and then she finished them very quickly and asked for more recommendations, and then I recommended her other books. And then these books made her cry, and we were talking about how much we love crying at books, and then I have wanted to do a video all about the books that have made me cry for years now, and I just never have, and now I finally am. So today I'm going to be talking about the top 10 books that have made me cry. Now, I will just say, I cry very easily at books and movies, even a cute commercial. I will cry very easily, so take that with a grain of salt, I guess, because it doesn't take much to make me cry, or it doesn't take much for a story to make me cry. So anyway, I'm going to get started telling you about these books that have made me cry. Now, this is just 10 of many books that have made me cry, but I feel like either I don't talk about these books enough or I can't talk enough about them. So the first ones that I want to talk about, I'm saying first ones because there are two, but it's the same story, because I read it recently, but it was a reread, so let me explain. So the first book is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. Now, Charlie Mackesy just won an Oscar for the adaptation that he created. This is the animated story version, which became a short film. It won the Best Animated Short Film at the Oscars, which I was so happy for him and proud of him, and just watching an illustrator and a writer and an artist achieve such an amazing thing and get such wonderful recognition from maybe people that don't know of him or of his book or of his work. It just, oh my god, I was just weeping watching him win the Oscar, and it was just such a special moment. So I recently read the animated version, or animated story version, but The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse has been one of my favorite books since it came out, I think in 2019. I loved this edition because it's basically in the same style of the original, but it is the animated version, and it's a bit more of a straight narrative, whereas the original story is a bit more like vignettes, like illustrated vignettes. And I thought instead of giving you synopses for every single one of these books, I will just read you the first page or a few pages. Synopses are great, but sometimes I feel like I do a bad job and I don't do the book justice, and I think reading the first part of a book can just really entice you and intrigue you and not give too much away. So anyway, the book opens with the little boy, and so basically they took the short film and just captured stills from it, captured the still illustrations, and put it in book form. So it says, "Hello," which is the mole saying hello. "Hello," said the boy. "What are you doing here?" asked the mole. "I'm lost," said the boy. I feel like I'm reading to you guys like it's bedtime. I used to do this when I worked at Barnes & Noble. I would always be in the kids section, and I would always read to them at story time, and I loved it. "Oh dear, well that's no good. So how did you get here?" asked the mole. And then it keeps going, but it's just a wonderful story, very deep and emotive, and by the end of it you will just be weeping very bittersweet, mostly sweet tears. So just so proud of Charlie Mackesy. And this is the book that I read most recently that has made me cry. For like the millionth time. I have read this story a billion times, and every time it makes me cry, but in the best way. The next book, I just had my best friend Mia, who I was just talking about, read for the first time, because she had never read a Fredrik Backman book before and that needed to change. So I told her to read A Man Called Uve by Fredrik Backman. Now, I talk about Fredrik Backman all the time. If you're familiar with me and my channel, you know how much I love him. He is my favorite contemporary writer, and this was the first book that I read from him many moons ago, maybe in 2018. It has remained one of my all-time favorite books, just absolutely ever. I love Uve. My heart belongs in this story, and it's just everything that I love in a narrative is found in this book. So if you want my personality, I guess, in a story, I feel like it would be this. But I don't know. I think so. I really think so. I actually just created a reel on my Instagram where I shared my favorite quotes from different Fredrik Backman books. So if you want to check that out, you can find that as a reel on my Instagram. But I cannot recommend Fredrik Backman's books enough. I also should mention that last night, while I was thinking about this concept and planning out this video, I asked you guys on my Instagram story to tell me which books made you completely weep your eyes out. So that is the mission and goal for this video as well, is to tell me in a comment what book or books have made you cry, because I am forever on my own quest to find more books to make me cry, and I feel like it would be fun to create a TBR of books that I know will devastate me, but in the best way. So this is my recommendations for you of what books have made me cry, but I would love to know what books make you cry so that I can make a new TBR solely for books that I know will make me cry because they made you cry. So I think that'd be fun. So that's the mission for this video, so definitely leave me a comment in the description. I will greatly appreciate it, and tell me what books have made you cry. But anyway, A Man Called Uve, I love so much. I don't think I'm going to read you the first page because I did that in a recent video, but I think what I will do is read you some of my favorite quotes, which are featured in that reel that I was just talking about on my Instagram. Okay, I'm going to read the quotes off of my phone because I have them from the reel that I made. So the quote is, "People said Uve saw the world in black and white, but she was color, all the color he had." And that is in reference to his wife, Sonia, who I just love her character so much. Okay, here is another quote from A Man Called Uve. "She just smiled, said that she loved books more than anything, and started telling him excitedly what each of the ones in her lap was about. And Uve realized that he wanted to hear her talking about the things she loved for the rest of his life." I could just cry right now reading that. Oh, settle down, Carolyn. Oh god, I love them so much. I love this book so much. If you want to cry, read any Fredrik Backman book. Also, if you want to laugh and if you want to feel joyful and comforted and just every emotion that you can feel, read a Fredrik Backman book. If you haven't read nothing from him, I would start with A Man Called Uve because it is beautiful. The next book that I want to tell you guys about is a book that I first read when I was getting back into reading. I was in early college, I think end of 2017. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I read this quartet, which is a series of 4 books, and the 4th book just devastated me in the best way. It made me cry so much, and I never really hear people talking about this series. They mainly talk about the first book. The 4th book in the series is called Sun, and it is by Lois Lowry. This is the Giver Quartet. So the first book is The Giver. If you are American and if you went to a public school in America, then you might have read The Giver in middle school, which is where I first read the book from. And then when I was in my 1st or 2nd year of college, I decided to reread it. And I fell in love with it again, and then I found out that it was a series of 4 books, and so I read all 4 books, and the last book is Sun, and it was an incredible end to the series, and it just left me in a river of my own tears. I just read the first paragraph. I think what you need to know is that we are in a dystopian world where mothers are not necessarily mothers in the traditional sense. I don't want to say too much else, but anyway, okay. So chapter 1 starts by saying, "The young girl cringed when they buckled the eyeless leather mask around the upper half of her face and blinded her. It felt grotesque and unnecessary, but she didn't object. It was the procedure. She knew that. One of the other vessels had described it to her at lunch a month before. And that's how it begins. It is so good, and the way that it all comes together, it feels like a million threads that have been woven apart from one another in the whole series of the Giver Quartet, and then they all come together and weave into one in this book, and it is just incredible. And I remember taking a picture of myself just with tears streaming down my face after finishing this book, and it's just a great memory. The next book I did tell you guys about recently, but it really, truly made me so emotional, and I was not expecting for this book to make me as emotional as it did, and I want to talk about it again because I feel like just more people need to read it and love it and adore it as I did. It was so unexpected, it was such a pleasant surprise, and it left me incredibly hopeful and just so happy and emotionally affected, and that book is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I just think he's a gem of a human being. If you watch his Instagram, his reels, just if you listen to his videos on YouTube, if you hear him speak, he just is such a great guy. There are so many things about this book that I love. It is a nonfiction book basically about John Green discussing different things. A few of my favorite chapters. One was sunsets, about sunsets. Another one was about Auld Lang Syne, which is the New Year's song that we always sing at the New Year. And I think I want to read you guys part of that chapter because it is incredibly moving. Okay, the whole chapter of Auld Lang Syne is so beautiful, but I think I want to share with you just one little paragraph from that bigger chapter. And that paragraph says, "And I think about the many broad seas that have roared between me and the past. Seas of neglect, seas of time, seas of death. I'll never again speak to many of the people who loved me into this moment, just as you will never speak to many of the people who loved you into your now. So we raise a glass to them and hope that perhaps somewhere they are raising a glass to us." I just love it. I just love it. This whole book is incredible, and I read it very recently, and it is definitely one of my favorite books that I read so far in 2023, and it made me unexpectedly emotional, so I had to talk about it and tell you guys about it again. Cannot recommend this book enough. The next one is an old favorite, and it is one that I read once, cried my heart and soul out, and then never read again because I'm so scared to get heartbroken again, but in the best way. I really am in need of a reread of this book. It's been way too long, and that is A Monster Calls, a novel by Patrick Ness, inspired by an idea from Siobhan Dowd, and it is illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, Jim Kay. I don't want to say too much about the book. I'll just read you the first page. So here is what the first page looks like. The illustrations are gorgeous, very ominous and gloomy, and just fit the whole mood of the book so well. And adds so much to the whole experience, the whole reading experience. Okay. The monster showed up just after midnight, as they do. Connor was awake when it came. He'd had a nightmare. Well, not a nightmare, the nightmare. The one he'd been having a lot lately. The one with the darkness and the wind and the screaming. The one with the hands splitting from his grasp, no matter how hard he tried to hold on. The one that always ended with, "Go away," Connor whispered into the darkness of his bedroom, trying to push the nightmare back, not let it follow him into the world of waking. Go away now. He glanced over at the clock that his mom had put on his bedside table. 12:07, 7 minutes past midnight, which was late for a school night, late for a Sunday, certainly. He told no one about the nightmare. Not his mom, obviously, but no one else either. Not his dad in their fortnightly or so phone call. Definitely not his grandma, and no one at school. Absolutely not. So that's how A Monster Calls starts. It is just devastating. It's just devastating, but in a beautiful, beautiful way. The next book was my favorite book of last year, of 2022. I talk about this book all the time. This is the book of literary fiction that has made me cry, I think, the most out of all literary fiction, I think. I'm pretty sure. and that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book just literally took my heart out of my chest, squeezed it, crumbled it into a million pieces, let the ashes fall to the floor, and then just blew my ashes into the wind. And now I don't have a heart anymore. This book is incredible. You should know nothing about it going into it. This is another book that I recommended to my best friend Mia, who just read A Man Called Uve, and she didn't know if she wanted to read another devastating book or one that was happier. And I said, if you want to read a happier book, I would maybe not read Never Let Me Go. But it is a beautiful book. It is a stunning book. It is so many emotions all at once, and I will read you the first page or the first paragraph because I think you should know as little as possible. My name is Kathy H. I'm 31 years old, and I've been a carer now for over 11 years. That sounds long enough, I know, but actually they want me to go on for another 8 months, until the end of this year. That'll make it almost exactly 12 years. Now I know my being a carer so long isn't necessarily because they think I'm fantastic at what I do. There are some really good carers who've been told to stop after just 2 or 3 years. And I can think of one carer at least who went on for all of 14 years despite being a complete waste of space. So I'm not trying to boast. But then I do know for a fact they've been pleased with my work, and by and large, I have too. And then I'm going to stop there because I don't want to read anything else. But it is just, it is just so, I don't even know what, there are no words to describe. Just read it, but know that you're going to be heartbroken in a really great way, and try to go in not knowing too much. That is my advice. That is my advice to you. The next book is a classic that has made me cry quite a lot, and I didn't actually include Anna Karenina or War and Peace in this video just because I talk about them so much and you guys know how much I love them. So I wanted to shout out another book that has also made me cry so much, made me so angry when reading it, and made me so heartbroken, and that is Tessa the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This book I completely annotated and devoured, and this is one of those books that I wanted to throw it out of the window so badly and also clutch it to my chest all at the same time. This book made me want to rip out every single page while also putting every single piece back together and trying to make everything okay, because there is so much heartbreak and sorrow, and it's just such a harrowing story, and it's beautifully told. Thomas Hardy is an incredible storyteller, and just while reading this book, I was completely and utterly heartbroken. And I don't want to say too much else about it. So chapter 1 begins. On an evening in the latter part of May, a middle-aged man was walking homeward from Shaston to the village of Merlot, in the adjoining Vale of Blackmoor, or Blackmore. It's spelled 2 different ways. The pair of legs that carried him were rickety, and there was a bias in his gait which inclined him somewhat to the left of a straight line. He occasionally gave a smart nod, as if in confirmation of some opinion, though he was not thinking of anything in particular. Now, I just love, that's a perfect example of how great Thomas Hardy is at painting a descriptive image and just painting imagery in your mind. He does such a beautiful job at creating a world and creating a scene and creating a setting, and also just ripping your heart out. So yes, Tessa the D'Urbervilles. The next book is another old favorite, one of the very first books that I read when I was getting back into reading. That book is Tuesdays with Mori by Mitch Albom. Now, this is a nonfiction book, and it's just one of, oh god, it's so good. It's one of my favorite stories. So the cover says, An Old Man, a Young Man, and Life's Greatest Lesson. And this book is about Mitch Albom's experience visiting his old professor named Mori every Tuesday, because Mori is suffering from ALS, or motor neuron disease, and is basically reflecting on life and giving Mitch his advice and It's just one of the most impactful books I've ever read. The conversations that they had and the things that they spoke about were so deep and impactful and moving, and I love really deep, impactful, moving conversations just in my own life and reading about them. And they are captured so beautifully in this book, so I will read you the first paragraph, maybe a little bit more than the first paragraph. Okay, so the first chapter is titled The Curriculum. The last class of my old professor's life took place once a week in his house, by a window in the study where he could watch a small hibiscus plant shed its pink leaves. The class met on Tuesdays. It began after breakfast. The subject was the meaning of life. It was taught from experience. No grades were given, but there were oral exams each week. You were expected to respond to questions, and you were expected to pose questions of your own. You were also required to perform physical tasks now and then, such as lifting the professor's head to a comfortable spot on the pillow or placing his glasses on the bridge of his nose. Kissing him goodbye earned you an extra credit. No books were required, yet many topics were covered, including love, work, community, family, aging, forgiveness, and finally, death. The last lecture was brief, only a few words. A funeral was held in lieu of graduation. Although no final exam was given, you were expected to produce one long paper on what was learned. That paper is presented here. The last class of my old professor's life had only one student. I was that student. That's the first chapter or I guess the introduction. Oh, it's just so good, and it'll make you cry so much, but it'll also make you feel really hopeful and really just impacted and affected and moved, and it's just a wonderful, beautiful book, and I highly recommend you read it if you haven't. The next book I will never shut up about until my dying day, and that is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This is my favorite book probably ever. I love it so much I will never shut up about it. It is just perfection incarnate. Is it incarnate? It's a book. I don't know what to say about it. I always have an incredibly hard time explaining what this book is about because it is about so much. I've read it countless times. I cannot tell you how many times I've read this book. This book has informed so much of my identity and so much of my life and so much of my work, and I owe a ton to Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. A fun fact is that this book was actually written very close to where I live, which is incredibly bizarre and weird and crazy, and is the coincidence of a lifetime because Antoine de Saint-Exupéry lived most of his life in France, and then he traveled to Long Island during the time that he wrote this story, and the house that he wrote this story in, it's a very quick drive from where I live, and I found that out about a year ago, and I don't think I ever mentioned it in one of my videos, and I just think that that's so crazy, and it baffles my mind. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry lived his whole life in France, and then this book was written on Long Island? It's just crazy. So, yeah, this book just means so much to me, has such a close connection to my heart, and I don't know what to tell you about it because I always have a hard time explaining it, so I guess I will read you the first paragraph. We of course have the iconic illustrations, and the first chapter begins, "Once when I was 6, I saw a magnificent picture in a book about the jungle called True Stories. It showed a boa constrictor swallowing a wild beast. Here is a copy of the picture." And that's the first one. In the book it said, "Boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing. Afterward they are no longer able to move and they sleep during the 6 months of their digestion." In those days I thought a lot about jungle adventures and eventually managed to make my first drawing using a colored pencil. My drawing number 1 looked like this. And that's the drawing number 1. Looks like a hat. It's not a hat. I showed the grown-ups my masterpiece, and I asked them if my drawing scared them. They answered, "Why be scared of a hat?" My drawing was not a picture of a hat, it was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. Then I drew the inside of the boa constrictor, so the grown-ups could understand. They always need explanations. My drawing number 2 looked like this. and then he drew the inside. Can you see that? There it is. That's all that I'll read of The Little Prince. Just please read it if you haven't. If you have, then you probably cried while reading it as well. That ending. Oh, that ending every time. The whole book. I just cry throughout reading the whole book, not just the ending. The 10th and final book is a book that means the whole world to me, and it is from the writer and illustrator who basically is why I'm sitting here today as an aspiring author and illustrator myself. I found his work at the age of 9. I was never the same ever again. I owe so much to him, and I love all of his stories. And the one that made me cry most recently was The Marvels, and that is Brian Selznick. Brian Selznick he, as an illustrator, as a creator, as a human being, means the world to me. His stories mean the world to me, and The Marvels, when I read it at the end of, I think, 2021, I sobbed my eyes out at this book. Oh my god. Because the way that he writes his stories, or illustrates his stories, he illustrates parts of them and writes parts of them. So for this one, it begins with a story told in pictures, and then when you look at the pictures, they kind of become a memory in your mind while you read the next section, which is all words. Then at the end, it goes back to pictures, and the way that it emotionally affects you, the way that the pictures, which turn into words, which turn back into pictures, the way that it's done, I just thought it was complete and utter brilliance and genius, and basically I just think this book is a masterpiece, and in story and in pictures. So I will just read you the first part of the section that has words, because obviously I can't read you pictures. I could show you the pictures. So the first part of the book begins in 1766, and then the part that begins with the story takes place in 1990. Joseph was lost. Somewhere far away, the headlights of a car swept through the snowy night. He stopped to rest beneath the low passageway off an ancient cobblestone street. A single rustling street lamp flickered nearby. He put down his heavy suitcase, dried off his glasses, and coughed. He was shocked he'd made it all the way to London without being caught. But then again, the headmaster at St. Anthony's was probably relieved he was gone. That's the first paragraph. I'm so tempted to keep going. Okay, I'm not gonna keep going. You just have to read it. You have to read it if you want to hear more. And I highly recommend you do so. Brian Selznick is he's just the best. So that is the 10th book that has made me completely cry my eyes out. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about these books and hearing about what books have emotionally destroyed me, but in the best way possible. Again, please let me know what books have emotionally destroyed you in a comment, and then I can maybe make a little list or TBR for myself. You guys, of course, can see what everyone writes as well, and we can share all of our favorite heartbreaking books with each other, and then create a TBR of all the heartbreaking books we need to read. So yes, definitely share that in a comment. Thank you so much for all of your support, for always being so kind and wonderful and lovely. I am so appreciative and grateful that you're here, and I hope you are having a wonderful day reading some amazing books. I will see you soon in another video. Happy reading.